Hello friends, my name is Emile and welcome back to another ETCC recap show. This time to take a look at rounds 9 and 10 that took place on the Bathurst circuit on July 7th, 2017. Bathurst would mark the final place we would go to in this ETCC season, with rounds 9 and 10 closing out the season, and well, with the championship being as close and as tight as it was, we were bound to get some very close and some very tense racing. Let's take a look at the starting grid for round number 9. In pole position we had a Rhino GT4 of Team SFR in the BMW M235i. Prod EKR would be joining him in the Honda Civic Privateer. Afternoon 7 in the Team Aerodynamics BMW GBT 1996 in the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza. CR27 Gaming in the CR27 Racing Lexus IS350. DJ Yuko in the Speedtrap Motorsports Mazda 3. Harry K5 in the Private Greener Pinkertier Ford Focus Thing. As a 9K in the Twitch Motorsports Lexus IS350. Prod Forza 4 AMG in the Prod BMW M235i. HP Pinder in the Pinder Racing Peugeot. Blitz Skyline R54 in the Bay Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. Racing Heart GT in the Privateer Subaru Impreza. Invisible AK in the Elite Virtual Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. Me in the Reverse Gear Autosport Ford Focus. A new face, Skippy is Cool 394 in the Privateer Mazda 3. And finally, to round out the grid, we had GTO out of nowhere in the 306 Racing Peugeot 308. As we get racing then for round number 9, and there is a wee bit of a collision on the starting grid, despite my best warnings that the starting grid on this track is really rather narrow, and so is the first corner, so you probably shouldn't try to change your position on the grid. People did it anyway. And yeah, we did have a little bit of a collision a bit further back that would cause some damage to some lower down cars. However, it wasn't a major incident, but we did have a few issues coming off the starting grid. Now, Bathurst, the reason I chose this track is because, well, I really very much like this track, and it felt like something a little bit different for the ETCC. However, whether you like this track or whether you hate this track, there is one thing you do have to admit about it, and that is that overtaking is a bit of an issue on this track. So it would be very interesting to see sort of the passing opportunities people would take around here. Of course, the track is very narrow. There isn't a lot of runoff area, and trying to get around people is rather difficult, especially with all of the elevation changes as we come over the hill and into my personal favourite bit of the course, this sort of downhill section. I love it. This is sort of the lower backpack. You'd see the Bay Racing Scirocco would have a couple of issues and wouldn't really be checking his side mirrors. I would get into him. I guess that's sort of an equal fault thing. I wasn't really sure where he was going, but either way we would get past. I was of course bringing along the 306 Racing Peugeot 308. So this lower backpack, we basically had to slow down to avoid these starting line incidents, while most of these cars weren't actually involved in them, hence why most of them look very very clean. We would sort of get involved, we'd have to slow down and so on. The Peugeot just nips me on the straight. The straight here you'd think would benefit the Volkswagen, however the Volkswagen's gear ratios are rather long as the Bay Racing Scirocco goes to play with some scenery. The Ford Focus actually tops out perfectly on this track, but the Peugeot obviously has a bit more power, and surprisingly enough that actually does benefit it more at the top end. You know, the Peugeot we usually associate with being a more acceleration and handling driven car, but apparently at the top end it can actually be one of the quickest cars as well. As we drop back to the Team SFR BMW M235i, he would find a familiar rival from Lime Rock in Prod EKR in the Privateer Honda Civic. However, he would also be bringing along a face which hasn't really been competing in the lead title picture so far, and that is the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza of GBT 1996. Of course, Jimmy is Australian, so chalking up a win here would be something pretty impressive for him. Of course, this battle is for first place. Rhino would lead the pack. He would, of course, starting on pole means you can basically get away, and he was looking to get a repeat result of round number 8 as they passed the dead car of As a 9K, who would eventually drop out of this race and, well, eventually just drop out of the next race as well. unfortunately not being able to score any more points, which, unfortunately that car has had a very, very, very unfortunate time here in the ETCC, which is a bit of a shame. However, Rhino, of course, using that Australian-inspired livery, there was quite a few livery changes in this race, as there usually is. However, there was a few major ones. Of course, the Team SFR BMW would look a little bit different. CR27's Lexus would also gain an initial D style livery as well. So a lot of interesting things. And then we had, of course, a couple of evolutions of different liveries. You know, mine had slightly different decals. I believe the Prod Civic looked a little bit different as well. Moving down the pack, sort of towards the back, these were the cars that were involved in collisions. There was quite a lot of pitting going along in this race. People sort of just diving into the pits to try and repair their cars. I don't think either of these guys had done it yet, but there were certainly some cars sort of lower down the field that where we follow aboard the Pinder Racing Peugeot 308, who was looking to score some points here at the final 2 rounds, sort of trying to cement his picture here in the ETCC, as we see newcomer Skippy in the privateer Mazda 3 dive into the pits. I believe he was one of the ones that took some of the worst damage from that starting line conundrum. Prod's BMW was actually quite far down the field as well. I believe this was the battle for 8th or 9th place, as he does battle with the newly initial deed style livery of CR27's Lexus. As much as I do not like initial D, I do have to admit that Lexus does look rather cool in that livery. And of course it's very fitting here, considering Bathurst is kind of quite a hilly track, certainly. Anyways, of course, Prod BMW, while he may have been quick at other tracks, Prod himself admitted Bathurst wasn't quite his best track. A lot of the people in this race, sort of our faster drivers, said that Bathurst wasn't really a track they had much of a feel for. It isn't a track which they see used often when it comes to racing series, and well, as a result, it would hopefully result in a couple of surprise interestingnesses, such as the fact that the Prod BMW was sort of trying to battle his way through the lower pack. As we join the leading battle once again, Rhino GT4 still leading, but that Underground Racing Subaru Impreza is closing on him. Not only does the Impreza have the home field advantage, it turns out the Impreza actually a pretty well set up car for this course, despite rear wheel drive, which would mean it would gain some issues through that sort of downhill section. It did have a decent amount of acceleration, did have just enough amount of handling, and it's a really rather balanced car for this course, as it turns out. It also helped the fact that, as we found out on this track, the BMWs do not have a lot of straight line speed, and well, that would eventually mean the Subaru would look to take his pass on the Team SFR BMW, racing him down the line. You can just see the BMW hasn't quite got the straight line speed of the Impreza, which allows him to nudge his nose just in front of the BMW, a la what the Peugeot did to my Focus a couple of laps back. This would shake up this battle, because with the Impreza leading, he is officially in first place, and well, their battle had managed to bring the Civic a little bit more into contention, which the driver of the Underground Racing Super Impreza was hoping would slow down the Team SFR BMW, because of course, if he is sort of trying to keep him off his rear end, he'll be taking some maybe not quite optimal lines, which allows the Impreza to escape towards the front of the grid. Yeah, good clean overtake from there. The straight was one of the places where we were seeing the most amount of overtakes. There wasn't really a whole lot going on through the downhill section. It was through that, and it was also through this sort of corner coming up. We saw quite a few attempts at an overtake. Lower down the field, the race did start to get a little bit spread out around this point. Of course, with people diving into the pits, it would mean certain cars would be a couple of laps down and so on. And with the sort of front runners running off towards the front, wasn't a whole lot going on down here. Admittedly though, we did have the occasional battle popping up, but really there was about 2 battles going on in this race that we sort of kept going back and forth on. Speaking of going back and forth, we rejoin the Prod versus Lexus battle that we had going on here. Prod BMW would find his way around the CR27 Racing Lexus IS 350, but CR27 was not willing to give that position up lightly as he chases down the BMW. The Lexus, despite being involved in some calamities, of course the CR27 Lexus had a few issues on the starting line, and as his Lexus had to retire. The Lexus was another car sort of similar to the Subaru. It actually surprised me on how decently set up it was for this track. It did definitely have the straight line speed on the BMWs. You can just see sort of down this straight how much the Lexus can catch up. And because the Lexus actually has more power than the Impreza, in the right hands, the Lexus could probably have had a go at some of the Imprezas as they come down towards the last corner. Then this one is a rather tricky corner to get right in my experience. In practice I was having a lot of issues with this corner, just trying to find the braking zone for it. The braking boards are quite horribly sort of out, so you can't really use them for reference, but as well as that, you know, if you go too far past the braking boards you will just outbrake yourself. So I was having some issues with that corner. Most people were sort of just having issues towards the first corner and in the downhill section, sort of not being as quick as maybe they could be. Unfortunately though, the Lexus would end up sort of losing the Prod BMW. While he had done a decent job of holding him back, the Prod BMW would end up sort of driving away from the Lexus a little bit, looking to move on his way up the grid. As we rejoin the battle going on towards the front of the grid then, and this would actually turn out to be the battle for second place. The Underground Racing Super Impreza would drive himself away, while the BMW of Team SFR and the Prod Civic would start battling once again. These cars may have been involved in some form of incident. The Honda and the BMW are both looking rather battered. Not quite sure what happened there. I'm also not 100% sure on how the Civic actually managed to get round the BMW. One would imagine there was a slight incident with the BMW on one of the hilly bits, and well, that managed to let the Civic go and overtake. You can sort of see the Subaru Impreza in the distance there driving away. Yeah, the Civic was another car which did pretty well in this in round number 9. Wasn't expecting the Civic to do quite this well. Of course, it is a front-wheel drive car, but it's the least powerful car, and it's the worst front-wheel drive car in a straight line on paper. So yeah, I wasn't actually expecting the Civic to be battling towards the front, but you know, I really wasn't expecting. There was a lot of surprises in this race. Well, let's put it that way. As I said previously though, down the pack and sort of in the mid-pack and so on, wasn't really a whole lot of battling going on. So that battle for second place was really the only thing going on. The EVR Scirocco that we're seeing here was sort of stuck floundering in 4th place, I believe this was. There really wasn't anything really around him. He was just sort of running in his own air, doing his own little hot lapping thing. The leaders were miles in front of him, and pretty much anyone behind him was miles behind. So yeah, not really a whole lot of battling going on here. Once again, save for that battle for second place. Yeah, just the grid was a little bit dead on this one. However, one lap later and we would crown our winner of round number 9, and well, it would be a first in the ETCC, a first win for the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza. He drove a very, very good race, managed to get towards the leaders very early on in the race, and eventually managed to get the lead position from Rhino, allowing him to secure his first win here, and a well-deserved win it really is. The Impreza not having had the best look at some of the previous rounds. In round 7 and 8 though, the Impreza started on its little bit of a resurrection. It got some pretty good results overall in that race, and well, it ultimately culminates in a first place result for the Impreza here. So yeah, really very, very solid drive. As you can see, I'm actually catching up to some of the back markers here. The back markers would do a pretty good job of getting out the way here as he dives off the track, which is very nice, allowing the Impreza some room. See, that's just what the back markers should do, just dive off without too many issues. But yeah, A really good, really solid race for the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza, allowing him to chalk up his first win here in the ETCC. It is also worth mentioning, as we go ahead to look at the event results, the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza would in fact capture the best lap time of the entire event as well. So there we go then, Jimmy T1996 wins the race, of course, coming into first place. Prod EKR is in second in a Honda Civic, winning the battle with Rhino GT4, who is in third. In fourth we have Invisible AK, who had a rather lonely race. There was 7 seconds between the guys in front of him and 7 seconds between the guys behind him. The guy behind him is Harry K5, who gets a really good finish, especially considering his finishing positions in the last couple of races, with a 5th place there. Afternoon 7 would get a 6th place. I would chalk up a 7th place, which is sort of okay. And 10 seconds behind me was Pro Forza 4 AMG. Well, he drove an okay race. Sort of loundering behind CR27 and so on would cost him when it came to the final results. Speaking of CR27, he would get into 9th place, which is a pretty good finish overall for him. Rounding out the points is a GTO out of nowhere, who ends up in 10th place. In 11th, we have a Skippy is Cool, who had a rather interesting first race here in the ETCC, having to pit in sort of early on lap 2. And yeah, that would sort of affect his race a little bit. Blitz Skyline R34 would come in 12th. A Racing Heart GT would gain 13th place. HP Pinder in 14th place. DJ Yuko in 15th. And of course, the retirement of Asa9K would make him a last place in 16th. As we move on then to the final race of this season, here is the starting grid. In first place we have Afternoon 7 in the Team Aerodynamics BMW, with DJ Yuko in the Speedtrap Motorsports Mazda 3 joining him there. CR27 Gaming in the CR27 Racing Lexus IS350, a Rhino GT4 in the Team SFR BMW M235i. Skippy is Cool in the Privateer Mazda 3, Harry K5 in the Pinker Green Tier Ford Focus. Prod EKR in the Privateer Honda Civic SI, with a Blitz Skyline R34 in the Bay Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. Prod Forza 4 AMG in the Prod BMW. HP Pinder in the Pinder Racing Peugeot 308. Me in my reverse gear Autosport Ford Focus. Invisible AK in the Elite Virtual Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. GTO out of nowhere in the 306 Racing Peugeot 308, GBT 1996, the previous winner in the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza, and Racing Heart GT rounds us out with the Privateer Subaru Impreza. As we get underway then for round number 10 of the ETCC, this would be a 6-lap race with drivers required to perform 1 pit stop during this race. There was a couple of start line shenanigans, however they weren't quite as bad on the starting line as in the previous race. However, through the first corners things would get slightly messier. A couple of cars would be involved in that. I came off the worst in all that, in all honesty. I sort of ended up bouncing off the Pinketeer quite a few times, which would result in my race at first being a little bit of a disappointment as we follow aboard the CR27 Gaming Lexus IS350 here. There was a little bit more of an issue there. The 306 Racing Peugeot 308 would go out a little bit wide, but he would manage to tame it in. The Lexus going for a little bit of drift there in front of the Team SFR BMW. Afternoon 7 hoping to do what Rhino had managed to do in the first race, just sort of decided to run away towards the front of the field and try to stay out of this battle pack, but the battle pack was chasing him down. A pretty awesome looking train of cars going down here then. However, the train would have to sort of quickly start slowing itself down because they were coming to the downhill section and trying to go many cars wide through this section. Even 2 cars wide can result in some issues. Prod would slightly bump the Team SFR BMW. The Lexus would grind upon the wall, but we do manage to get through the downhill section somewhat cleanly, as CR27 would continue to lead this battle pack, and as well as that continue on with his second place, although the Prod BMW was looking to get around him. As we know by now, the BMW does not have the straight line speed that the Lexus has. Sort of this lower battle pack here, then the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza would lead a pack of 4 cars consisting of the Pinder Racing Peugeot 308, the Privateer Subaru Impreza, and the Pinketeer Ford Focus. as they would come down towards the second to last corner. Now I thought, oh, I'll be smart, I will take my pit stop on the first lap, no one else will think about doing that. It turns out quite a lot of the field thought about doing that. The reason I did it personally was because I had a shocking first lap. I got punted and bumped around like no one's business, and I was sort of looking to make up time by sort of having my pit stop early and then coming out on the field, but it turns out quite a few of the cars decided to do that. However, of the cars that decided not to go into pit stop, there was still some interesting battling going on. The privateer Subaru Impreza finding his way around the Pinder Racing Peugeot to become the lead man in this battle pack here. Harry K5 was looking to have a good result, just like he did in the previous round, and hoped to book some points up both for him and for Ford in the Manufacturers' Cups, which of course, even though the drivers' rankings is sort of the main focus right now, the manufacturers' rankings are still very much a hot contest at the moment. As we go now to join a battle that we have seen unfold a couple of times during this season of the ETCC, and that is of course the 306 Racing Peugeot 308 versus the Team SFR BMW M235i. Rhino looking to chalk up some extra points in the championship, which he desperately needs in order to become one of the top guys. Meanwhile, the 306 Racing Peugeot 308, very much an on and off car during this season, would have some pretty good races, but ultimately get some bit shoddy results thanks to some issues. He was looking for the best finish he had been able to pull off so far. This is the battle for second place, I believe, as the Team SFR BMW and the Underground Racing Subaru Impreza do get into the side of each other. This would only benefit the 306 Racing Peugeot 308. It would allow him to gain a little bit of ground on those guys as the tyre wall explodes spectacularly. As we sort of go more towards this battle then, as we follow aboard the Rhino GT4 BMW M235i, the Subaru looking to go for a very similar move that it had managed in the previous round. Looking to go around the outside here. The BMW does bat him a little bit wide, but unfortunately though, for the BMW, that would not be enough to take the Subaru off course, as he would be able to make the pass on the BMW. So a pretty similar pass to what we had seen in the previous round then. The Subaru managed to go around the side of the BMW. The BMW though was not happy with being passed twice within the same night, as he would start working his way back up to killing off that Underground Racing Subaru Impreza. Yeah, pretty good battle these guys would have. Of course, now, as you can see just in front of the Peugeot, the Team Aerodynamics BMW would join in the battle. I believe he had just come out of the pits. He decided to pit a little bit later than some of the other guys in this contest. As far as most things went though, everyone decided to pit pretty early on in this race, as it turns out. Many people, of course, decided to do it on lap 1. I think the latest pit we realistically had was lap 4. But yeah, that was something that did happen as they battled their way up towards the hill. The BMW starting to become the one slightly more shafted of all of them, as the Subaru decides to go and battle with the BMW, looking to try and find a way around him. He cooks it a little bit too much into that corner, allowing Rhino to score the pass on the Impreza, as he will now be looking at getting around that BMW. However, if Rhino thought he was a man on a mission, he just should have seen me. After my somewhat abysmal start and me having to dive into the pits early, I say having to, it's just that I decided to dive in on a lap 1. I decided to put the strategy, despite everyone else sort of thinking my way, I decided to try and put my strategy into work. Pitting early, allowing myself to make up time on those who had decided not to pit, and hopefully started to put me back into contention as I was looking to work my way up the field. And so far, so good. I had managed to get through the back markers of the field and was looking to charge my way up. I believe at this point I was in about 8th or 9th position, coming back from last in the grid, which I think is a pretty good feat so far. However, I was certainly not finished yet. This race was not even halfway through yet, so I was looking to make up a few more positions in this. Yeah, I was not happy with the calamities on the first lap, but nevertheless, I was looking to make the most of my momentum. The Senior Aerodynamics BMW would ultimately start getting dropped a little bit out of the battle he had previously had. However, he would A, enter my sights, and B, also try to now get past the CR27 Racing Lexus IS 350 that had just exited the pit just in front of him. Yeah. Sort of when it seems like these 4-stop races either end in one or two ways. One, the field gets really very much spread out because everyone's pitting at different times, or two, the most exciting thing, the thing that we like to see happen, is basically people dive into the pits, come out of the pits, and then instantly find someone to race, as the Lexus had managed to do here. Of course though, while these two guys are slowing down each other by battling, it is allowing me to work my way up towards the Lexus and the BMW. Yeah, them managing to knock into each other a little bit during the hill climb section of this course had managed to let my Ford Focus catch up considerably, and while I may not be very quick when it comes to this sort of top of the hill section, I'm actually quite slow up here. We are coming up to my favourite section of the track very quickly, which is of course the downhill section, and through the downhill section I am a very quick driver indeed, managing to catch up to the Lexus. They would overcook it a little bit. I would try to get around the Lexus as he goes a little bit sideways. On the inside, that is too wide in the downhill section. Luckily managed to pull off the move just about there. Special thank you to the Lexus driver for not utterly destroying me on that one, because yeah, realistically you do not want to go to ride on that downhill section. However, somehow I did manage to make the move stick. Towards the front of the grid then, and well, surprising no one, it would be Invisible AK, who would currently be in the lead in the Elite Virtual Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. He would do the smart strategy, of course, getting his quick stop done very early on in the race. I'm not quite sure when he did manage to get his pit stop on, and well, managed to go quite undetected under the radar and managed to pop his win in when the last car to pit managed to pit on lap 4 or 5. I believe he was leading the race for a couple of laps. As soon as he pitted in, the Elite Virtual Racing Scirocco would go ahead and take the lead in this race. He would have a pretty quiet race on his own for now, of course, just because there's no one really around him. Speaking of the previous leader in the race, it was a Racing Hard GT of the privateer Subaru Impreza, looking to make time up that he had lost in his quick stop. Not having the best first race here, he was looking to make it up in this second and final race here at Bathurst. Once again looking to make it up the field. You will have just seen there the dead car of Prod Forza 4 AMG. Not quite sure what happened to him, but unfortunately both he and Prod EKR actually would end up dropping out of this race, which would seriously affect their point standings. Of course, if you're not in the race, you can't score any points, which for two guys like that, you know, guys who are leading the championship, that can seriously throw them off. The Subaru Impreza, though, was looking to make up some time. I believe he was in 4th or 5th place while this was going on, having a pretty lonely race, although this race certainly was not as lonely as the previous race. Two guys who were certainly not lonely, however, was the 306 Racing Peugeot 308 and the Team SFR BMW M235i. They were still embroiled in their battle. This battle went on for pretty much the entire race, as the 308 was still trying to shake off that BMW down the straight. Would be its best chance to do so, but the problem is the BMW is so good through the corners, sort of both thanks to the driver skill and because the car itself is quite one of the easier rear-wheel drive cars to drive. While the Peugeot may have the edge in handling, it still can't quite shake the BMW. There really is not that much in between there, and with the Peugeot getting a little bit of a slide on that last corner, it would allow the BMW to catch up and basically make up all the ground that he lost on the straight. Yeah, this was a rather incredible battle as the BMW tries to make a move on the 308. He is moving side to side, looking to do it. However, as we get onto another straight, it will be the 308 that will manage to pull from that BMW. As they come in to this sort of hill climb part of the course as they start it. The Peugeot would once again go for a little bit of a slide, allowing the BMW to try and make a move. He does bump slightly on the back of the Peugeot, but still, nevertheless, cannot make the move stick as they come around this corner here. The Peugeot does manage to get a little bit of a better drive out of that corner than BMW, allowing him to make up a little bit of time, managing to shake him a little bit. But the BMW is still going to be clinging onto his tail as they're on the uphill section now. There really is nothing the Peugeot can do to shake the BMW as they start the descent. This is where the BMW may turn out to be the slightly quicker car, as it just balances handling speed a little bit more than the Peugeot does. However, through these sort of tighter turns, I would put my money on the Peugeot, of course, being the better handling of the two rear-wheel drive cars here. As you see, the Privateer Super Impreza that we saw earlier, sort of lonely and on his own, he would start catching up to this battle pack. At this point, the Underground Racing Super Impreza was completely gone. Speaking of completely gone, our winner would eventually turn out to be Invisible AK, driving the Elite Virtual Racing Volkswagen Scirocco. Quite an apt ending, considering this man has won, I believe, 5 of the ETCC rounds out of 10. So yeah, a very fitting way to end the ETCC with one of his victories there. You can see the headlights of the Underground Racing Super Impreza there, who would come a magnificent second place, a first and a second. That is pretty much the best result we've ever seen here, save for the back-to-back victories of the Elite Virtual Racing of Volkswagen Scirocco. I was pretty proud of myself. I had managed to battle my way up the pack and ultimately actually ended up getting in 6th place, all the way from 14th place, or 15th place even, from the first lap, which I thought was pretty good. And eventually I would even get another position gifted to me right on the finish line, as unfortunately the Racing Heart GT would just slightly overcook it into that corner, which allowed me to chalk up a 5th place position for my final race here in this season of the ETCC, which I was very proud of. Onto the event results then for the final time in this season of the ETCC, and it would of course be Invisible AK who would get the win in the final round. GBT996 would come in 2nd place and would score the fastest lap of the race in the Underground Racing Super Impreza once again. GTO out of nowhere would end up winning his battle with Rhino GT4 in order to secure 3rd place, with Rhino coming home in 4th place. 10 seconds behind them was me. I managed to get home in 5th place, which I deem very respectable. Afternoon 7 was just behind me in 6th. Racing Heart GT, thanks to that last corner calamity, would end up in 7th place. CR27 Gaming in the CR27 Racing Lexus IS350 would get an 8th place, and Skippy is Cool would score a 9th, which means that every single person who's participated in the ETCC has got on the points leaderboard. Rounding out the points is Harry K5 in the Ford Focus. HP Pinder manages to secure 11th place in the Peugeot 308. DJ Yuko scores 12th in the Mazda 3. Blitz Skyline comes home last of all the active racers, with his Volkswagen Scirocco having to dive into the pits earlier on in that race once again. Prod Forza 4 AMG and Prod EKR would unfortunately retire from this race, and that may hurt them when we go into the final drivers' rankings. Speaking of which, here is the final results of the ETCC then, and it would be Invisible AK who would win the championship overall with 146 points total. Huge congratulations to you, sir. In 2nd place, it would be Rhino GT4 with 132 points, who manages to pass Michael in 100 by a 1 point to claim 2nd place. Michael in 100 would be in 3rd place overall. Prod Forza 4 AMG could not pass Michael, and however, he would end up in 4th with 128 points total. In 5th, Prod EKR with 74 points total. Thanks to his incredible results in rounds 9 and 10, GBT996 would be just 1 point off Prod EKR with 73 points total. I would score a very respectable 7th place with 60 points all in all In 8th, Racing Heart GT with 44 points. Tied for 9th is Harry K5 and Afternoon 7, who both score 38 points overall. And in 10th, rounding out this top position in the drivers' rankings, is GTO Out of Nowhere, who scores 30 points total. Moving down the board, CR27 Gaming wins this battle of sort of the bottom of the leaderboard with 9 points total. In 12th, we have a Blitz Skyliner 34, who managed to chalk up 7 points total. In 13th, HP Pinder 500 with 5 points. And tied for 14th place is both Skippy is Cool 394 and DJ Yuko, who both managed to score 2 points. And in 15th, we have Azza with 1 lonely point, thanks to his terrible luck throughout the series, unfortunately. In the manufacturer's standings overall then, and it would be Volkswagen who would take the crown with 99 points, managing to maintain their lead from the previous round. BMW would score 97 points overall, meaning that they are in second place. In third, we had Honda. Despite their late start, they would be one of the most successful manufacturers here with 74 points total. In fourth, we had Subaru with 60 points. In fifth, we have Ford with 51 points. In sixth, we have Peugeot with 24 points overall. In 7th, Lexus, who managed to score 8 points. And in 8th, Mazda, who scored 3 points, which is kind of ironic when you consider the car they were running in the ETCC was the Mazda 3. So there we go then. That is the ETCC fully rounded up. Special congratulations once again to Invisible AK and Volkswagen for winning the ETCC championships overall. So, well, what comes afterwards then? Well, I'm delighted to say that I deem this to be a pretty good success. While there have been certain failures here in the ETCC, quite a few of them, we've certainly learnt some lessons, which I will get into in a minute. Overall, I deem this to be very successful. The turnout to this was absolutely amazing, and I want to thank each and every single person who participated in this, whether you showed up for one race or whether you showed up for all 10 of them. There will be a Season 2 of the ETCC, which will take place in Forza Motorsport 7 at some other point. As far as Forza Motorsport 6 goes, we will be hosting one final racing league on here in the month of August. Stay tuned for that. As for me, I will be taking a small hibernation here from YouTube. While I'll still be here and answering comments and so on, I just will not be uploading much after this video, just because I kind of want to take a break and get my upload schedule back on track, so that when we hit August, I'm hitting the ground fully running, and especially for Forza Motorsport 7, which I'm very excited for. So there we go. Thank you all very much for watching. For those of you interested in more ETCC content, there is both Rhino GT4 and Pinder's channels in the description. Those guys have both uploaded recaps of the ETCC on their own. And we will also be having an ETCC wrap-up podcast, which will come out the day after this video does. So stay tuned for that. It is rather hilarious. We have already recorded it and I think it turned out magnificent. So we will be hosting a podcast after every previous round. One more thing to mention is we now have a Discord server for any racing events that will take place. It's not my private server, this is the new Discord I have set up. There's a link for that in the description. It's an invite link. Feel free to join that. So yes, without further ado, thank you all very much for watching. And until next time, friends, farewell.